There were three obscure but very important people who all lived in Ventura in 1971, and it was these three people whose highly specialized skills kept the Apollo 15 astronauts alive after they began their plummeting descent toward Earth at an entry speed of 25,000 miles per hour on August 7, 1971. The three residents of Ventura were so unique from all other Americans that NASA prohibited them from occupying the same vehicle for fear that they might all perish at the same time, effectively maiming the American space program and giving the Soviets the advantage they so desperately sought.
Soviet Union's first and only super soldier. I could have been more famous than Captain America.
It was believed that the nation, which could show space supremacy, would have the technical, tactical, and symbolic strength necessary to subdue the other. The Soviets had achieved some early victories with the launch of Sputnik in 1957, followed in 1961 by humanity's first foray into space, in which cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth in a mission that lasted just under 2 hours. The space race was an extension of the arms race, which in turn was a component of the Cold War being waged between the US and the USSR. The implications were bigger than just three people in Ventura carpooling together. There were potentially geopolitical and global ramifications. As an aside, it wasn't quite clear whether the three Ventura residents, Norma Creedle, Buzz Corey, and Jimmy Kalunga, were allowed to sit together if they were in a stationary car. Could they board a train, plane, submarine, merry-go-round, or go-kart together?
I really hate to do this! Huh?
Could just two of them carpool?
The carpool?
All you have to do is drive them to school.
Honey, no, please. What about one of the neighbors? What about Mr. Kupek?
He's had 3 strokes.
And could they all attend the Ventura County Fair together, given that a freak Ferris wheel could spin off axis and crush all three national heroes simultaneously? Luckily, this didn't happen. The Apollo 15 mission was considered to be a success. The crew, consisting of Commander David Scott, pilot Alfred Worden, and pilot James Irwin, encountered only minor mechanical and technical issues, which they promptly resolved without hindering mission objectives.
You think we'll be ready by November?
One of the highlights of the mission involved a gravity experiment which tested Galileo's over 300-year-old idea that a falling object would accelerate at the same rate independent of its mass. This was the so-called equivalence principle and was supposed to hold true in a vacuum without the influence of air resistance, which is why the lunar landscape was the perfect stage for such an experiment, given the relative absence of an atmosphere and therefore air resistance. In front of a live TV audience, Commander David Scott carried out the falling object experiment using a falcon feather and a hammer dropped from a distance of approximately 1.6 meters. These objects were quite different from the standpoint of mass, and on Earth the experiment would have failed due to the feather encountering resistance from air molecules. But in the lunar environment, the experiment worked perfectly, demonstrating the equivalence principle that objects of different masses would accelerate at the same rate and hit the lunar surface at the same time as a function of the moon's gravity. Americans watched this being demonstrated empirically before their eyes for the first time in history, televised from the moon to their living rooms.
I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Which proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
On August 7th, Americans also got to witness the Apollo 15 capsule re-entering Earth's atmosphere. Thankfully, this experiment too went well and did not end in tragedy thanks to the behind-the-scenes expertise of Norma Creedle, Buzz Corey, and Jimmy Kalunga. What made their skill set so critical? As it turns out, Norma, Buzz, and Jimmy were the only Americans trained and certified to fold parachutes for all 11 of the manned Apollo missions. Why was parachute folding so important, you might ask? For this, you could take my word for it that falling through Earth's atmosphere a distance of 6,000 miles toward the surface in an aluminum alloy death trap requires some form of reliable deceleration, especially as the kinetic energy begins to convert to thermal energy to the tune of greater than 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Cue the parachutes. But first, if you're learning something new, take a second to subscribe so the learning doesn't stop here. At the time of the mission, the population of Ventura, California, a suburb of Los Angeles and seat of Ventura County, was approximately 60,000 residents, and the population of the U.S. was just over 200 million. Yet in a strange eggs-in-one-basket situation, the only 3 people out of 200 million who knew how to properly fold Apollo 15 parachutes all lived in a city that today is roughly 32 square miles. The parachutes in question were no joke. There were 3 of them, and each were nearly 85 feet wide, with upwards of 21,600 square feet of fabric in total, which is nearly 1/2 of a football field in area. Together, the parachutes required 10.5 miles of thread and 6 million stitches, which were then visually inspected one by one before Norma, Buzz, and Jimmy folded and packed them. It is unclear whether these poor souls ever folded another piece of their own laundry after working for NASA for 11 missions, which would have involved folding nearly 250,000 square feet of parachute fabric, and these were just the main deceleration chutes, not counting up to 6 more smaller parachutes deployed in the lead-up to the 3 main chutes just described. The scientists at NASA were no chumps, but parachute dynamics was not the kind of science that lent itself to computer modeling. There was simply too much chaos that could unfold, and no computer could model all possibilities given changes in airflow, wind, turbulence, and weather conditions. Perhaps the fact that there were 3 parachute folders was a redundancy. Maybe only 2 would have sufficed, just as there were 3 parachutes, but only 2 were absolutely necessary. Even so, this slight redundancy somehow doesn't seem to inspire the requisite confidence. Retrospective analysis showed that one of the chutes actually did fail, which means the bare minimum of 2 functioned as intended, which brought the Apollo 15's velocity down to a pedestrian 22 miles per hour as it drifted peacefully into the Pacific Ocean, just north of the Hawaiian Islands. This turned out well thanks to the work of Norma, Buzz, and Jimmy. If you enjoyed this true story, be sure to subscribe. Also, check out this video about the time Napoleon took on a battalion of rabbits and lost, or when Tycho Brahe got into a sword fight with his cousin over a math problem.